Okay, so let's get started. So I'm in the test project for this particular tutorial, the one that's used for the dialogue, as well as the interaction system and the various doors. So yes, so I do have a bit of a list of things I'd like to get to. Whether or not I do, I don't know. I don't know. So I'm wanting to essentially go through a few things on the dialogue system, see if we can just improve and sort of add a few additional features on there for everybody to use. So the first thing I'm going to tackle is the audio. So in terms of the dialogue system itself, obviously there's currently no way built into it that allows you to play audio with the dialogue that's shown on the screen. Now this might be something that you possibly want. So what we're going to do is go ahead and open up the dialogue base actor component. And what we actually want to do is go to the main event graph, and you want to add an event begin play. So the way that we want to play the sound is actually through using an audio component. The reason why, so if I do play audio or play sound at location, this particular node here is kind of like a fire and forget type of thing, which for certain sound effects and things like that is great. But there may be instances where, particularly with the dialogue, where the player might choose an option before the dialogue's finished. And if you're using something like the play sound at location, you'll end up with overlapping sounds playing, which is just not going to sound very nice. If we're using an audio component, that allows us to essentially stop the audio and then update the sort of sound file that we'll be using to do that. Now, we could, if we wanted to, just add the audio component directly to like the MPC base. A better way to do so would be to actually dynamically add the audio component when we need it. So in this case, if we're adding the dialogue base, we can probably assume that it's something that we're going to need, so we can sort of add that on. But what I'll do, I'll start by just adding create a new variable called use audio. And we'll drag that in and do a branch, and we'll connect that to the begin play. Now what we actually want to do is get the owner, so this is the actor that the component itself is placed on. We want to add audio, add component. Yeah, so we want to choose the add component by class, and then from the drop down list we want to find the audio component, and then we can connect that up. So what this is going to do is essentially automatically create that audio component on the owner that this component's added to. What we then want to do is actually just store a reference to the component. So if we drag from the return value and we promote that to a variable, I'm just going to call this one audio component. This just allows us to get it when we need it. Okay, so that's the initial bit set up. So we have this audio component. At the moment it doesn't do anything, there's no sounds assigned to it. So what we now need to do is go through and essentially use this component to play the dialogue. So the first thing we can do, well the next thing we'd do, is if you want to go to the add dialogue function. So the add dialogue function is, if we just open up the mouse one, is this particular node here. So it's the one where we sort of specify the speaker name, the dialogue, and any options that the player would have. Obviously that function lives in the base, so that's where it is. You can just double click on the node and it'll take you into it. So it's in here that we want to add the dialogue. So what we can do on the add dialogue function, we want to add an input to that. So I'm just going to call this one audio, and then for the file type, let me just double check. Sound, yeah. So it's sound base object. So for the audio type, that just needs to be sound base, and that can just be as a. So what I'll actually do, I'll do it as a soft reference. Now the reason why is audio files themselves can get quite large, and the last thing you want to happen is to have essentially all the audio files loaded for the dialogue when they're not actually being used. So that's just going to eat away at your RAM. So if we do that as a soft reference, there is something we can show you how to set up and how you can actually load that. So a soft reference is kind of like a reference to the file itself, but without loading said file. So what we can then do is if we get the audio input, so get audio, although actually I'm going to rename that from audio to dialogue audio, just so it's a bit more descriptive. So do get dialogue audio. The first thing we want to do is actually check if that's valid, because if it's not valid, then we don't want to do it. We don't need to do anything with it. So I'm going to pull from that and do a branch. So this is just checking that there's actually something in there. So if we go back to the mouse one, you'll see the option in the list. I don't actually have any audio files on this particular project, so it's going to show as empty. But if you add any sound files, they'll start to show up in the list that you can then select that specific audio file to play as part of the dialogue. So go back to the base. So if that is valid, what we actually need to do is essentially load the audio. So what we can do is if we pull from the soft reference and we do resolve, so resolve soft reference, you will get this node here with the little blue. Now this blue reference is kind of like the normal one, so this is kind of like the loaded version of the reference. And what we want to do is actually check if that's valid as well. Now the reason why is if it's valid, we can actually go ahead and just use it. If it's not valid, we need to load it first. So with that done, we get the audio component in, and then we can do the set sound. So if that's valid, that's so. And then we can actually just connect that straight up. Now if it's not valid, we need to load the audio. Now the thing with loading assets is kind of like two ways that you can do it. So so you can do load asset blocking, and what this will do is it will essentially kind of like pause everything until that particular audio has loaded. So it essentially causes your frames to dip. It gets done on sort of the game thread, so it'll hang, everything will hang until it's loaded. So that is an option. If that's what, if you don't mind that and the file size will be quite low, you might be able to get away with it. In which case you can quite easily just do it this way. So that's just an object reference, so we do need to actually cast to the sound base. So when you load anything, it kind of like loses what it is, like its type. So in this instance, we know that's always going to be an audio file, so we can just cast straight to it. So you can kind of do it that way. Now this in itself is kind of done. That once we've connected this up, it would kind of function. But what I'm going to show you how to do is actually load it asynchronously. So it'll just play as soon as it's loaded. So depending on the person's machine, there might be a little bit of delay there. It's up to you whether or not that's the sort of thing you're wanting or not. So before I continue, I'm just going to actually go ahead and drop all this into a function. I'm just going to call that play dialogue audio. Dialogue audio, like so. And we can actually just connect that straight up to the return. So this is called straight after you update the dialog text. So let's go back into there. And we do actually need to make sure we're passing the reference in. So what I've done there is I've just dragged from the input here and added it in, and that creates the input. I'm just going to name it audio, just so I know what it is. So these references are dead. You can sort of see the grayed out. Now the reason why is because they use this particular input here, which they no longer have access to, which is why we have an input instead. So we can reconnect that up from the outside of the function. And we just need to update these to use the new input. We need to change that type again. And do that as a soft reference. Get audio. Yeah, we'll just reconnect these back up. So the first thing this function will do, as I said, it'll check to see if the audio that it's wanting to play is actually valid. If it's not, then it'll just do nothing, which is fine. If it is valid, it'll then check to see if that particular audio file is already loaded or not. If it is, then it'll just go ahead and set the sound to the audio component, and then we can actually go ahead and just play. Like so. And then, in terms of that branch, that's pretty much done. So in terms of loading asynchronously, so we don't need to use the blocking version, we actually need to go to the main event graph. So if we type in async load, that's not that one. Yeah. So it's the async load asset that you want in. So it's this one here. You'll notice that it's asynchronous, sort of like a latent node because of the little clock icon on there. So what that means is it might not necessarily complete in the same tick that it's called, which is why there's a completed tab on there. So when this gets called from the front, it'll also execute on the back on the same tick, but then once it's finished loading, it'll then also call on the completed. So what we're going to do is pull from the front, and we're going to add a custom event. I'm just going to call this one load dialog audio, and we can just connect that up, and then we just need to change the type here to sound base, and we'll do that as a soft reference. I'm just going to update the input name just to sound base, and then as we did inside here, this function here, we just need to cast to that specific type. So we can pull from the object and cast to sound base. I want to make sure that's on the completed pin, not the top one, because this is what we want to happen when it's finished loading. And then once we've done that, we can get that audio component again and set the sound. We can set it to that sound base. And then lastly, we just want to play the sound as well. So play. Just like so. So because of the way that this is set up, it does mean that if there's already an audio file that's playing and then you go to play a new one, it will essentially stop the old one and then play the new one from the beginning again. So it kind of gets overwritten, which is quite handy when you're changing the dialogue before it's finished playing the sound. Now, in terms of that's actually the audio side of things sorted out. So fairly straightforward. Oh no, I've completely forgot to actually call the function, the custom event we made there. So if we come back into the play dialog audio, we can actually just remove all of this bit, the load asset blocking, and we could just call that load dialog audio instead, and just connect the audio input from the main function. Okay, so now it's done. So in terms of this loop, it'll essentially load the audio file if it needs to. Once it's loaded, it'll then play it. Okay, so as I mentioned, that's done. So on the add dialog, you should now have an option where you can specify the sound file. As I mentioned, I don't quite have any. I'll try and show something at the end with the dialog working, just so you can sort of see that. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is playing a montage. Now, again, it's not overly complicated, there's just a few moving parts that we've got to do. So again, it's sort of similar to the play dialogue audio where we're going to be adding it essentially to the chain after we do the update dialogue. The update dialogue text. So for this one, what we can do is get owner. So again, this is going to be the owner so the actor that the audio component has been, so the dialogue component has been placed upon. Now, what we can do when we go to play a montage, what we need ideally is the skeletal mesh. So what we can actually do is just do get component by class, and for the type we can select skeletal mesh component, like so. And if we pull from this, there should be an option for play montage. Let's do montage or not. Okay, so what we'll need to do then, it'll be in the event graph that we'll probably need. So I'm just going to copy this into the event graph. And then if we do it from here, there we go. So the play montage is also a latent node, just because there's quite a lot of things on there that aren't going to finish in the same tick. It's an animation, it takes time. So what we can do with this is, again, similar to the audio, is create a custom event. And we'll call this one play animation. And we can connect up the montage to that. Like so. So with us using the get component by class, this will work on any character. So it's not going to be specific to kind of the dialogue, the NPC base. I do believe there are a few things in there that's specific for the dialogue, but obviously it's just one of those steps that helps keep things a little bit more reusable for other places. So you can, if you've got multiple different types of NPCs, it should work. If, however, your particular NPC or character has multiple skeletal mesh components, you might need to do some filtering to possibly get the main one that's kind of like the leader of the animations. But for that, you can do the get components by class, which will give you an array, and then you can just filter through and use the call the play montage on the relevant skeletal mesh. But if you've only just got one, then this particular method will work fine. So what we can then do, if we go back into here, we can do the play animation, we can just call it. But before we can do that, we do need to add a new input to the dialogue component, just like so. Again, you can do something similar with the animation files. If you've got quite a lot, you probably want to go do them as a soft reference. So instead of it being an animation montage, that's the blue one. So instead of it being an object reference, you do it as a soft object reference. And you know what? I'll quickly set it up as a soft reference just to give you guys more of an idea and how to do that. So I'm just going to call the input animation. We can still keep the play animation function. However, I'm just going to unhook this and change that to the soft reference. Like so. Let's reconnect that and do animation. Okay. So what we can do is, again, we can just do a resolve on that, and then is valid. So again, that's just checking to see if the animation or the montage is already loaded. If it is, we can probably just go straight in. No, we'll do it as another event. So custom event, so play loaded montage. So again, this one would be the blue pin. We'll call that one so it's valid. just like so. If it's not valid, we can pull from here and do the async load again. So the async load asset, just like so. Now with this one, we know that this is going to be of a montage, so we can cast to the montage. So the anim montage, like so. Again, just want to make sure that's on the completed. And then once that's been done, we can just call that play loaded montage again, like so. And we do have an error there, so what's the issue? Could not find parameter. Okay, let's just refresh that node. There we go. Okay. There we go. So that's the montage side of things for the most part sorted out. Now, a few little things that we do want to do on the closed conversation is actually stop any audio and stop any montages. So from the closed conversation, if we get the audio component, we can stop just like so. I'm just going to drag this before the conversation closed function. And then similarly, we want to get the owner again with a skeletal mesh. And if you pull from it, there should be an option to stop. That's not the one I'm looking for. Okay, so I think we need to cast to the character, so we'll just do the standard character. And there we go, stop anim montage. Like so. So what this will do is it'll stop any montage that's playing. If you wanted to be specific about it, you could always store a reference to the montage when it plays and connect it to here, so it'll only stop that particular montage if you're doing something fancy with layered montages that are playing. But I think for most people, just leaving it blank will just stop all montages, which I think for most cases, particularly this type of system, is probably going to be perfectly fine. So yeah, so that's that done. So that is the first two on the list ticked off. Like so. So in terms of this, we can see on the dialog, I do already have some montages in here. So I do actually have a few of these selected. So I'm just going to select some of them. These animations, just so you are aware, are just from Mixamo. So if you are looking for some, you can have a look on there. So let's give this a quick test to make sure the montages are playing. So if I interact with him, see, plays a little montage, cheese, I'll play a different one because that's what I've selected. Like so. So as you can see, that's working. If there isn't a montage selected, like animation, then we won't do anything. So again, it's up to you what you want to do on that. Okay, so it looks like there is an error here though, so let's see if we can quickly sort this out. So access non trying to read property audio component. Okay. Yeah, so the reason why is because the audio components we only create it if use audio is set to true. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually set that to true, so it's on by default. But we do actually need a few checks in place as well, just to make sure we're not doing stuff that we don't need to do if we've not specified to do it. So on the dialog, we have the play dialog audio. So if we come in here, we can actually just come in and from the is valid reference, we just do an and. So an and bool. So we'll just check both. So it has to both be a valid reference and use audio has to be set to true. So that's sorted. If it's not, then it won't do anything with the sound on that front. And then lastly, on the closed conversation, what we can do is if we just right click on the audio component and convert to a validated get, If it is valid, then we stop it. If it's not valid, then we can just move on. So that'll handle those messages there where it says it's not a valid reference. So I'll quickly test that again just to make sure there's no other issues. Yeah, so there's nothing on that particular animation, but yes, that seems to be working so far. As I said, at the moment it's just a case of then specifying the animation you'd like to play. Now, on the list there, I do have an option there for defining a generic talking montage when there's no valid montage. So that is something that we can do. So at the moment we have it where we have to specify one on here. Now, it might be that you just want a generic talking animation, and you kind of want that to play whenever one's not specified, but only play a different one if one's not been shown. So if that's the sort of thing you're wanting, then I'll quickly go over that now. If not, then you could probably sort of skip this section. So if we go into the play animation one, which is this one here, we do a check to see if the animation itself is loaded. But what we can do before there is actually check if this is a valid soft reference. So what I'm actually going to do is, from the montage to play, I'm just going to promote that to a variable and just call that active montage. And we'll just set that there. That way we can use this just to help keep things a little bit tidier, and it will come in handy in a minute as well. So we can actually pull from that and do a convert to a validated get. So that'll simplify things a little bit there. And we'll pull from that instead. Okay, so if it's not valid, so there's, it's attempting to play a montage but there's nothing listed in it, what we can then do is get it to pick a random one. So what we can do is, I'm just going to duplicate the active montage variable, and I'm just going to pull this generic talking anim, generic talking montages, there we go. And for this I'm going to do it as a type set. And the reason I've done it as a set is it just prevents duplicates appearing in the list. And I'm going to do talking 1. Oh, that's talking 3, but we'll add talking 2 as well. That's so. We'll do is not empty. So we just want to check to make sure that that particular variable isn't empty first before we even attempt to do anything with it. Right, so if it is, what we can then do is, let's just pull this down a little bit more room. We can then convert that to an array, and then we can just do random array item. That's so. And then it'd just be a case of setting the active montage to the item. That's so. Now with this all selected, I'm just going to collapse this into a function. I'm just going to call this one assign random. Assign generic montage. There we go. And if that's the case, we can just pull up and connect to the isValid on there. Although, actually, no, that's not what we want to do. I'm going to disconnect the active on here and just connect this one. It technically works either way, it's just going to move this over to help keep things a bit tidy. And what I'm actually going to do is just do an additional check to see if the active montage is valid again, and then if it is, just connect straight back up there. The reason why is because if this is empty, then it's not going to update to anything, so it's still going to be invalid, so at that point we just don't do anything. Okay, so that itself should be working now. So if I just save and compile, if I just clear out the montage that's selected on here, on these. And I've just deleted my panel. There we go. Yeah, so if I now go and play, even though I've not specified any animations, it should still play something. At this point, it'll just be a random one from that list that's specified. So obviously that's an option for you there. Like I said, it depends on the sort of game you're doing. If you're trying to do sort of more synced animations, it might not be that useful, but that's an option for you there. So the thing with it being a variable as well is when you go to the NPC and you select the component, you can actually specify different generic animations that you wanted to play on a particular NPC, or you can even do them specific per bit of dialogue, so it'll again show up in the class defaults and you can update those as you need to. Okay, so it's me from the future. So I thought I would just, as I mentioned earlier on, just show you the audio side of things. So I've gone ahead and got my 4-year-old son to actually record some of the dialogue. So I've got the audio recorders in here. So you should be able to, you'll be able to hear his adorable little voice as he says the dialogue for the mouse. So I've gone ahead and just imported these in. I've just put them in a folder. Again, these are just WAV files.
Hi, do you have any teas? Hi, do you have... that's great. Can I have some?
And as I mentioned, it's just a recording of the actual dialogue that's being spoken. So when it comes to actually adding these in, it's just a case of going to the add dialogue, well, where you call the add dialogue functions, and select the sound. So you just add those in. So mouse 1. So I've named these accordingly. 2A, 2B, 3A, and 3B. So as you can see, I've just selected the audio file that's going to play. Save and compile, and then if we go in and test it, when we interact with the mouse, it'll show the dialogue but also then play the sound, in addition to the montages as well.
Hi, do you have any teas? Oh, that's the same. I really want some teas.
Like so.
Hi, do you have any teas? That's great. Can I have some? You big meanie.
So yeah, so that's how you would go about adding the audio. So yeah, so I'll go back to past self now. So I think for now I will certainly leave, I think I'm probably going to leave this video there. But there are a few other things on my list that I'd like to do. Obviously you can read those there. If there's any of those in particular that you'd quite like me to show you how to do, by all means drop a comment in the video and let me know which one it is that you want to do. So I do just want to say thank you for watching. I really do appreciate all the support that some of you have been giving me. I do have a Discord, so feel free to jump on that. That should be in the link in the description. Additionally, I also have a lo-fi page for anybody that wants to support me financially. It's completely optional. But again, I just want to say thank you and take care.